Welcome to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. This episode is part of our Indies Introduced series, where we spotlight debut authors handpicked by booksellers from around the country. In each episode, a bookseller from the Indies Introduced panel will interview the author of a debut title featured in our program.
Hi, I'm Kristin from Riverstone Books in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Welcome to the Indies Introduced podcast. I'm here with Tess and Corby Campbell for their new book, A Wheelie Awkward Romance. Tess and Corby wrote this book, but writing isn't usually their thing. They are two ordinary people living their lives. Corby having spent the last 20 years in a wheelchair, and Tess having dealt with less outwardly obvious struggles. Corby is a software developer and amateur public speaker on topics such as resilience and gratitude. He even does occasional sit-down comedy gigs. Tess juggles creative projects and side jobs and mostly tries to keep their lives from descending into chaos. They have spent years statistically proving that they are evenly matched at strategic board games. They also play video games, construct Lego sets, and host elaborate murder mystery parties. This list probably makes them sound like nerdy teenagers, but they are, in fact, adults, proven by the fact that someone let them have a Costco membership. They own a house in Utah that is haunted by a sprinkler system poltergeist. So, Tess and Corby, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Hello.
So we'll get started talking about your book, A Wheelie Awkward Romance, which I absolutely loved as part of the Indies Introduced panel. It was one of the first books I read, and I fell in love with it immediately. But I would love to know what motivated you to write this account of the early part of your relationship.
So I met Corby in 2014, and it was an online dating website because this was right before apps started getting really big. So there wasn't a ton on the internet yet at that time about dating someone in a wheelchair. There were a couple of blogs. There's a lot more stuff now, but back then I could only find two blogs, and they weren't that helpful. One of them basically talked about everything she couldn't do after getting married, which made me wonder why they got married in the first place. It's like, why did you get into this relationship if you hate it so much? And then one of them was like, I never saw the wheelchair. It didn't really ever impact anything. And I was like, that just feels wrong, and unrealistic. And so I kept looking for an honest picture of what dating someone in a wheelchair was like, and I couldn't find that. And so I wanted to write that, but I didn't start until we got married. And then we ran into a few people who were also looking for that. And so there's been a couple times just in public where random strangers have come up, and there've always been women so far. And they've asked Corby, like, hey, are you married? Can I talk to your wife? I'm dating someone in a wheelchair and I want to ask someone what it's like. And every time this happens, I'm never with Corby. And so I've never been able to talk to these people. And I just wanted to have a book where we could say, hey, go and buy this, or here's a copy, and give it to them. Or there was someone in our neighborhood who had a coworker who was dating someone in a wheelchair, and she asked me, and she was like, hey, can I give your number to this person so she can call you? And I was like, sure, of course. But she never did, because it's weird to call up a stranger that you've never met. So I just wanted to have here, give her this, and she can read that and then reach out later if she has questions. So that's why I finally wrote it down.
I love that aspect of the book where you talk about, here's what happened, but then at the end, you're like, we know you have questions that you want to know how this works. Here's how this, real talk, this is how it works. I love that. So another thing I really liked about the book is it's a really great mix of your individual memories, but also the collective memory of how things happened. And I think that's really highlighted with the wheel notes that you have at the bottom of the pages. But what was it like to have access to each other's version of what your romance was like?
It's funny because I know, and I've read all sorts of things. You probably read things about how unreliable long-term memory is and how people remember accounts differently or whatever. So you'd think there'd be that, but we didn't have any of that really. And a large reason, some people have said oh, when are you going to write a sequel too? And Tess is like, no, I can't. Because one of the reasons the book was even possible was I had an app on my phone at the time that backed up all of my text conversations to Google. And so when Tess started this project, she went through all of those and compiled them all into a 2003-page document of our text conversations over 2.5 years. In addition to that, she had kept a daily journal, like a paragraph per day that she'd update weekly, or a long form journal when she was particularly angry at me, apparently. She called that journal entry, this is spoilers now, if anyone ever gets into your files. But she called the document All's Fair in Love and War, so it would look like an essay. So no one would read her journal if they got it. But between all these journal entries and between all these text message conversations, we had like a full, documentation of the whole era that's covered in this book. And so, if it was ever like, no, that was our second date, like then we could go look and be like, nope, you were right. It was the fourth date, so like it wasn't like a big journey to reconcile our memories of the events.
Yeah, all the text messages and emails in the book are actual ones that happened. Some of them are edited to make them shorter, but like even our dialogue, I pulled that from text conversations to get the tone right. So our first date is more awkward than later because our text messages when we started texting for the first time were just more awkward. So
it was funny even because, this is 10 years ago at this point. So we're slightly different people, if not largely different people. But we recorded the audiobook for this. And I would tend to read the sentence of what I said back then, but then my brain would just try to say it the way I would phrase it now, which is not exactly the way we wrote it back then. And so I'd like mess up, like we were trying to record the audiobook a lot of times. It's just, we're just different people. But so it's interesting we had the very accurate, documentation for it. So that's what made the book possible. And the memory's just fine. Yeah.
That's cool. Do you still keep all of your text messages in a?
No, we actually looked and that I got a new phone like 12 days or something after we got married. And so you can just see the last text messages like, "Hey, I'm going to get the new phone." And we're done. And so yeah, it was like, and I didn't even remember I had that app. So it didn't even occur to me to re-download that app. So it was just kind of perfect that I happened to have it during that era. I don't know why I cared to back up my text messages. It doesn't seem that important. But it did.
The other thing is that we don't text as often now.
True.
Part of the reason is because we're married, but part of it is because when we were dating, I hated talking. It made me so uncomfortable. Like you can see that in the book. And so we did most of our relationship building over text for those 2 years, and now we do it in person. So we don't have that written record anymore because we don't need it.
Yeah, if you look at our text conversation, it's just me being at work. I like to text her "I love you" most days.
Yeah.
And so if I'm at the office, I'll text her "I love you" around. So it's just like "I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you," her responding.
Hey, when do you want to be picked up? I love you.
3 o'clock. "I love you, I love you, I love you." So it's like there's nothing to document anyway. So
the other thing that I would say on this topic though is that we had probably a bigger struggle in the publishing process in our feelings than we did writing the book with our feelings because we are still very, very different people. And it wasn't as evident until we had to do a project where we were choosing between my preference of giving it to, 10 people who specifically asked for it, who were dating someone in a wheelchair who I wrote it for, and Corby's personality, which is, oh my gosh, I want everyone in the world to read this and I want to share it with just anybody, and that caused so many conflicts.
And great relationship discussions. But
yeah,
it just blows my mind. I can't imagine putting hundreds of hours into a project just for like 10 people. Like,
yeah, I never intended
of course
to
you're sharing
this
with people. Otherwise, why would you put this much effort into it? Right. So yeah, it's
I
very
was
fascinating.
legitimately just going to write this and print it at like FedEx and just hand it out to those 10 people. I never wanted to publish this. And so that was a bigger struggle.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
So knowing that it's on bookshelves across the country with little shelf talkers saying how amazing it is, how does that feel?
I have been hiding from
Yeah,
that.
I'm delighted. I go read the reviews and I have a good time. Tess, she's like, "Oh my God." I mean, I feel like we're supposed to, and so
Yep.
I'm glad we're done it. But can I be done now to some extent? And we're happy to engage in things like this and continue. But she doesn't really, if someone comes up and be like, "Oh, I wish you hadn't said that." She's like, "Well, it's done now. I can't take it out of the book. So like, what am I supposed to do with this information? I just don't even want to have it." Right. And so,
Yeah.
so I love that it's there. We didn't mention that was her original purpose was those people dating those, but as she explored it, she, discovered a lot about herself and there's generic things to be learned. And so it is really useful and powerful for a generic audience and not just that specific dating a disability. So I think it's great that it's on those shelves and I think people will be benefited by it.
I agree. I think I was. I mean, I know I benefited from reading it. Is there anything that you left out of the book that you wish you could go back and add? Like if you could, I mean, I know, Tess, you're not going to look at it again because it's done, but is there anything that you would go back and add or wish that you could add to it?
There's a few aspects to this. The first is just the word count. When we published, they were like, you have to keep it within these parameters. And so we had to cut a lot of like fun things. And that is like, I wish that there was more fun dates that didn't add to the plot. They were just, funny for whatever reason. When I was writing this, I would actually read James Herriot, All Creatures Great and Small, to get in the right headspace, because that's one of my favorite books, and I like his little just episodic. I'm going to tell funny stories about being on a farm. I'm just going to tell funny stories because I didn't want it to just be a drag to read. And so I feel like compared to some of my earlier drafts when I didn't have a word count because I was going to self-publish it, there was just more fun stuff in there, just. So I wish there was more of that in there. But
Yeah, she often said while editing, she's like, no one's even going to be like rooting for us. They're going to
yeah,
just come away from this book being like, why did you get married? And I have read like probably 80 reviews at this point, and no one has said
that's
that, by
so
the way.
weird.
But I could see how there were definitely some when she was trying to cut down stuff. She's like, I've got to cut, this fun conversation. I'm like, no, I love that conversation. She's like, you can't say that about everything. Like, we got to cut stuff. And I'm like,
Yeah.
so
I had like a bunch of chapter breaks with just random funny text conversations that we had that didn't mean anything. It was just like, wow, that was really witty. I like that we said that, and those are gone now.
yeah, some of them are gone, right?
Not all of
You've read it.
them,
We've left in
but
some of the highlights of those, but
yeah.
we had more anyway. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Did you have anything about these elaborate murder mystery parties? Because that's what I'm really excited to learn. No.
No, that's something I kind of allude to it in the epilogue. A lot of this book, I started writing it about Corby and his wheelchair, but because I was writing it, it turned more into a story about my growth, which made me kind of mad, honestly, because that's not what I meant to write. And so when I met Corby, I could never, ever, ever imagine myself being in a position where I was fine in a big crowd running a murder mystery party. And so the epilogue, it's like it just kind of shows the growth of like this is where I started, where I'm hiding in the basement, and the epilogue is where I'm running a murder mystery party. And we actually just barely did one on
Yeah, just
Friday.
Friday. It's only like twice a year, but we did one on Friday.
Yeah, and so we actually wrote this one. So we do still write sometimes, but we're writing murder mystery parties. And there's props and items and ways to kill the other players, and everyone has
They're
like
intense.
a page and a half long. They're like live action board games, strategic board games, where you get like 15 people who all have goals that I don't know.
But yeah, but that wasn't even a twinkle in her eye during the era of this
Right.
actual
So it
book, right? So
doesn't come up in the book.
That's amazing.
There
want
was
a
no
huge
way
cocktail
during
party.
that 2 year period I would have been able to handle a murder mystery
we
party.
bought most of them. We only started reading recently, so we'll
Yeah.
we'll text you the where to get them after this.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I'm interested in knowing what is next because Tess, you did such an amazing job at like you were such a natural on stage at the Winter Institute. And so what is next for both of you?
I have no idea. It kind of depends on how this book turns out. Corby already has been doing just like it said in the intro, amateur motivational speaking. We don't charge for anything that we do, but like he's speaking at a halfway house tonight. And over the years of us being married, I've started participating more and more in those speaking events. I don't know if this book will lead to more of that. Like we're fine doing that. One thing I
As
can
a
say is
as a
that I'm
spirit,
not going to write more. Like at least not books. If people have specific questions that I can address in like blog articles, I'd be open to doing that. But we don't have, I would never have been able to write this way without the text messages and the emails and the journal entries that I had. And public like dating Corby and choosing to marry Corby was one of the most stressful things I've ever done. And writing about that was almost as stressful. And I don't think that I want to touch that for quite a while. This was a
Yeah.
really, really, really hard project for us to do.
And
So,
and editing it for a third party publisher and stuff
yeah,
was a big struggle.
yeah.
And we're really grateful. I'd love to point out, like, part of the journey, we didn't attempt to get published. We looked
Ever.
online, and it's like, in order to get published, you need to have a literary agent. They have to submit it for like 3 years. You have to have like 300,000 followers. You have to be an expert in your field. Like, we don't have any of that. We don't have much. We made like a Willy Awkward Instagram just for this purpose, but like we don't have any momentum, and we don't intend to become internet celebrities in any way. And so just the way the story worked out, we just had a friend who's like heard we were self-publishing. She's like, no, I know someone. I'm going to submit it to them. And the publisher,
She used to plan a publisher's book release parties like 15 years ago.
yeah, so she had
So
a
we just knew
contact.
her through church. Like,
And
yeah,
she submitted to a guy, and he sent us this. They forwarded us this email. It's
it's
great,
not a guy. It was the head of the
Chris.
publishing company,
But well,
not
right, yeah,
just
yeah,
some
yeah, yeah.
random
Well, yeah,
guy.
this guy that has sway, right? His name is Chris, but he had this email that essentially said, when I saw the title of the book, even I was like, oh, this is sure to be awful, but I'll have a read at the author's expense.
Also, at the time, the working title of the book was My Husband is Lame. And that's partly why he probably thought that.
Yeah,
Because I was just writing this for fun. And I was like, my husband is lame. I'm
and
gonna,
we
we
use words
loved
like
that
that.
title.
We hate that people are like, you can't use words. We're like, well,
Yeah. But we just talk like that
some
anyway.
people are mad about that,
Yeah,
but.
so I think he was mad
Anyway,
about that.
so he was like, "Oh, the title is poor. Surely the book's going to be poor." And he's like, "So I went to read a few chapters at the author's expense, and I found myself really drawn in, and I really loved it, and I'd love to publish you guys, right?" And so we were like, "What? Like we're nobodies. Like why would you?" And so the fact that we got published at all has just kind of been a big surprise, and it's been a fun surprise for me and a stressful surprise for Tess at times.
Hmm.
But like, yeah, taking it on again anytime soon? Probably not.
Well, I think that's it's funny that the publisher was going to give just a couple chapters because I think what the most beautiful part of the book is that it really feels as you're reading it like we're best friends. So like I don't know if that's because it's so honest or because it's I don't so raw. I don't know, but it really does feel like I felt like okay, these are my two best friends and they're going out on a date and then they hung out in the parking lot of was it a Chili's? I can't remember, but like that,
Texas Roadhouse.
Close enough.
yeah. And so I think that's what draws people in is that we're a bunch of friends just hanging out for a couple hundred pages.
Yeah, I love it. Although it surprises me too, because that's a lot of the reviews and stuff. They're like, yeah, I love how honest and raw it is. You're like, it's a memoir, technically. What does everyone else write in their memoirs if not their
Yeah.
actual thoughts? I don't
I
know
don't
how
know
that
how
works.
else to write. And
Yeah.
everyone that we know is like, it sounds like you. And I'm like, what were you expecting it
Who
to
else are you going to
sound?
be? Like, I don't know. How many choices do you have?
That was probably because one of the reasons the publishing process was so hard is because they kept saying like, "Oh, we love how genuine your voice is, but can you change this?" And I'm like, "That's not how it happened." And they're like, "Yeah, but for the sake of the story, we just need to tweak this a little bit." And I'm like, "How do
Or at
this
least
feels like I'm
just
lying
don't say
now."
it that bluntly. You're
Yeah.
like, but that's what I thought. So, like, anyway,
Yeah, I don't
it
know.
was a journey.
It was tricky because I really, really value being genuine and honest. So that's I just write that way. I can't turn that off.
Yeah.
What do you hope readers take away with them from your story?
This is another thing that grew from the first part of writing this, where I was just targeting, people dating someone with a disability, where it was very physical. This is how you deal with a physical disability. Um, so that is in the book. If you just want to know about quadriplegics and some stuff about
Yes.
catheters and bowel care and whatever, that's in the book. Um, but then it grew again into stuff that I struggled with, which is invisible disabilities, because I have a lot of things that I struggle with. Um, and since being married, one of the hardest things about being married to Corby is some of the random comments we get where people are like, "Oh my gosh, I could have never married someone in a wheelchair. I don't know how you guys do it." And I'm like, this is not like you're looking at us and making a bunch of assumptions based on what Corby looks like. But if we had to rank things in our marriage that are hard, the wheelchair wouldn't make the top 5 most of the time. It's stuff that we're dealing with in other aspects of our life, or with my things, or, just life in
Regular
general.
life, yeah.
And so the very last chapter in the book is called Everyone is Lame, because everyone does have at least one thing, if not 5 or 7 or 10 things that they're dealing with at any given point. And so you shouldn't just look at people and make assumptions based on what you can see. So that it kind of turned into, everyone has a thing. Corby worked through the whole book with my things while I was working through his things. And so there's also just a lot about relationships in there and how you can, learn how to communicate better. One thing, if it's like a single reader, is that not all relationships look like Hallmark, where it took me 2 years to move on and accept Corby, where some people would be like, oh my gosh, that took so long. It's like, that's the time I needed. And it's okay that I had so many questions, and it's okay that I had so many doubts and fears. It doesn't make our relationship not work out. It ended up being fine. It just didn't look like the standard media relationship. So those are some of the things that I would say. Did you have any?
No, I mean that really covers it. Just the phrase, everyone is lame, and so like, yes, we work through our stuff, but I feel like getting in a wheelchair so you can drive around is much easier to solve than crippling depression,
Yep.
or a spouse that lives away from home 3 out of 4 weeks a month,
Addiction.
or addictions, or just toxic family members, or there's all sorts of challenges that are not at all obvious when you look at somebody. And so yes, we
Yeah.
have some challenges, and even some of those invisible ones too, but so does everyone. So putting other people on a pedestal, I hope people are motivated to take on their own challenges and work with the people in their lives, and just you can too. Everyone is lame, but you can all work through it if you tackle it. So
I actually just remembered another one. Some of the other things that people have said is like, oh, you shouldn't have given that up to marry Corby. You shouldn't have given up dancing to marry Corby. You shouldn't have given up those things that you loved. Kind of the implication is like, you shouldn't change for somebody else. And they're also, just in talking to other adults, it feels like people kind of plateau at some point. And one of the biggest things that I personally took away from both dating Corby, the stuff that the book actually talks about, but also through publishing, is that even when you're an adult, you can still grow a ton, and you can still change a ton, for the better and for the worse. But this book hopefully is for the better. Like, I feel I've changed a lot in the past 2 years just doing this. And I feel like I changed a lot in the book, right? Where I went from I can't talk to anyone to now I'm running murder mystery parties. And it was really, really painful and really exhausting and really awful at some points. But looking back now, I can see the growth. And so that's not one of the main points that I hope that people get, but I think it is there. Just the power of change and the ability to change.
yeah, all sorts of takeaways. I love to see what people's takeaways are, because there's a bunch of good ones you can have. So
I love that. I love that it can be personal to each individual reader, but there is a larger message about hope and change and resilience and all that.
acceptance, yeah. So
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much for speaking with me today. It was really wonderful to have you on this podcast. I'm so glad that we had time to do this.
yep, thank you.
Thank you, Kristin.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA site at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!